Thank you all so very much for joining us here for the El Paso History Radio Show, airing in this pre-recorded episode on News Radio 690 KTSM. I'm your host, Andrew J. Polk. Thank you for tuning in, however you may be doing so, be it on air, online, live streaming through the free and reliable iHeartRadio app, or joining us over on the various social media pages that we are going to be streaming this edition as well, including the Facebook page, El Paso History Radio Show, the YouTube channel, El Paso History TV, other similar types of pages, including other Facebooks, also Twitter and Twitch.tv, Andrew J. Polk for those, and also on some of our partner pages, including Remember in El Paso When. And this, of course, is the place where we say Texas history begins in El Paso. To have a history moment for you at the start of Hour 2 from documentary filmmaker Jackson Polk, today talking about Chinese immigrants in El Paso and their arrival. So, getting into our topic for today, going to be talking about the El Paso County Coliseum, its past, its history, its current realities, and its potential future. So joining us to talk about that, I'm joined here in studio right now by Tony Rodriguez, Director of Events with the El Paso Sports Commission, the agency involved and in charge of the operations of the Coliseum, as well as Dr. David Romo, author and historian, and specifically leader of recent tours, a little bit like earlier this year, late last year kind of thing, surrounding the history that surrounds the Coliseum itself, right?
That's right, yes.
He nails it, man. He's the man.
Well, definitely thank you both for joining us here to talk about that. So, when we're talking about the El Paso County Coliseum, I feel like most people would be probably pretty familiar with it, having attended an event or two in their life, particularly longtime residents. Anytime we end up mentioning the Coliseum on pretty much any of our airways, particularly this program, certainly, but other ways people often end up remembering the many different types of performances, events, stuff that's happened there over the generations, frankly, of which there has been, again, quite a lot, many different types of, particularly performances, don't get me wrong, that's been probably one of the things that people remember the most, but there's also other types of events that have been held there, other types of rallies even, and political and otherwise, but yeah, the performances and the many different kinds, we're going to be delving into those there and all of the scope of it as much as we can throughout today. But getting back to its roots and its history, when the Coliseum actually came about, well, as much as it was, El Paso was a very different place. So, Tony, starting with you, when you start talking about anyone with the Coliseum and about, kind of what it is and what's gone on there, where do you start describing to someone who, if you happen to run into that person, that's like, wait, what is this place?
So the Coliseum started as a rodeo.
Mm-hmm.
That's what was perfect for livestock show and rodeo. So you always go back to that. What I go then to is when I was there as a kid in the 80s, late 80s. I was born in 81 early. But I remember going to see the Ice Capades, which is now Disney on Ice, the circus. And so those are the kind of events that I went to. But it's also like what I tell people, it's not just a place for just events, concerts like that. It's a community building. From food giveaways, backpack giveaways, stuff that people go to, even just like Dr. Romo's going to talk about, just the community events that happened, whether politics or in rallies.
Sure.
So it's just everyone has a story of the Coliseum. And so that's what makes it special, because especially now that I have a granddaughter, now it's going to be able to share those memories with her. Hopefully everything goes well. But my kids go there now, and I take them to Disney on Ice, the circus. Mm-hmm. So they're reliving those moments that I did as a kid. So it's pretty cool.
So, and for those that may be wondering, okay, but we've talked a lot about things like concerts that have nothing to do with sports. How is an organization called the El Paso Sports Commission involved with this?
So the El Paso Sports Commission is contracted by the county to run the El Paso County Coliseum and the venue, but also bring sports tourism to El Paso. Okay. So, like, for example, in June, we had the Texas Police Games. That's going to bring law enforcement from all over Texas, Arizona, New Mexico, even as far as hopefully Nevada, and competing in Olympic-style games, which brings people to the hotel rooms. Mm-hmm. But when you talk about running the events, yes, it's running the El Paso County Coliseum, the event centers where the rhinos play, the judging arena, which is used for roller derby, lucha libre. We're doing Show Me Snakes in a couple weeks for by any kind of reptiles. So all that property there is used. Car shows. We're having a car show Memorial Day weekend on a Sunday. That whole property is being used. It's such a huge property, and you can do so much there. that was one of the places where people got their COVID shots. Mm-hmm. One of the fastest places to get through your COVID shot. You were in and out. But
I went through there myself during that time frame, and it was a very different way than I'd ever been in the Coliseum before. I'll say that.
Definitely. So it's used for so much. But that's how the Sports Commission is involved. It's bringing those type of concerts. It's bringing sports tourism to the city of El Paso.
Absolutely. So, Dr. Romo, you specifically led some tours that were focused on, I mean, not necessarily just on the Coliseum, though the Coliseum featured prominently, but also kind of the neighborhood and events that happened kind of in this whole area of town we're talking about, right?
That's right. The first time we stopped at the Coliseum was part of the South Central El Paso tour, because that's a neighborhood a lot of people know about the history of downtown,
sure.
South El Paso. South Central also has a fascinating history. So we went through, like, say, Alameda Street and then Ascarate, and then we stopped at the Coliseum, because the Coliseum is huge. I mean, we call it the place where history was made. And not only this very grounded history in our community, as Tony was talking about, so many events, high school graduation party, all kinds of events that are rooted in the community. But there was also, like, global events that happened there. So it does start off as a livestock building and a rodeo place, but this was in 1942, so about 81 years ago.
Wow.
And World War II was going on there. So one of the things that it was used for was as a detention and labor camp.
Right.
For Italian POWs.
And we actually have a picture of that there, of some that were being
some of them were transferred from Lordsburg and then brought to the Coliseum. And it's a little complicated, because at that time Mexico had boycotted Texas, so a lot of the cotton farming here in the El Paso region was not being done by braceros. So you needed POWs to do that. And there's all kinds of great stories. A lot of the Bowie girls would go and hang out with the Italianos, and flirted with them right outside the barbed wire. And in one occasion, a couple of the Italian prisoners of war escaped. And so they blamed it. The FBI blamed it on the Bowie girls. They said they helped them escape.
Right? We're trying to get out, man.
So there's the global local connection right there.
Interesting, right? Yeah. And I mean, even during World War II, and this one wasn't one that I knew about happening there. There were other events, promotions, I guess you could call it there.
Events.
This one is from a newspaper article from the duration of World War II. I don't see the exact date on it.
1945. Shot from the sky.
Yeah, shot from the sky at the El Paso County Coliseum, which was an exhibition of, enemy aircraft that had been downed, and so the wreckage had been dragged all the way here in order to, as kind of, a morale. I'm sure there was a war bonds component to it as well, as there always was at that point in time. So that kind of exhibition happening out there. I mean, there are some, let's just call them symbols, that are not very well received today, that are features on here because they were on the aircraft that were shot down.
Right. So the airplanes from the Luftwaffe, the German Air Force, and you have the Japanese Zeros. You actually, at that same event, there was some V-1 rockets.
Really?
Or components of the V-1 rockets that had been used on London at that time. So this was a kind of, I guess, frankly, a propaganda show that was trying to create pan-hemispheric alliances, Pan-American as they call it. So that meant throughout all of the Americas, so Mexico and the rest of the Latin American countries. So there were about 80,000 people that showed up to the Coliseum from both sides of the border. And there were so many other things that it was used for during World War II. It was an armory. It was a National Guard armory as well. Sure. So almost every component, every time there was a circus during the war, there was an opportunity to promote the Allied cause. So that's just one component of how important the Coliseum was. Like I said, you could just sit in the bench in the Coliseum and world history would come to you.
Absolutely. So when it comes to the site itself here, of course, people are very familiar with, the name for what we call the whole site, the Coliseum building itself, the, multi-story one. That is then again, the iconic red brick on the outside, and then has those entryways and then the kind of big central corridor. But again, the whole site is expansive in its own right. So we're looking at, when is this picture from?
So that's from the 1950s.
Okay.
So around this time period, now this was the start of the Korean War. Right, you could see right to on top. There's some metal buildings. So that was the livestock building, and that is what housed tens of thousands of braceros, Mexican guest workers, beginning in 1950 and 1951. and this is the beginning of the Korean War. And so at that time, look at the newspapers. They're calling, the newspapers are calling them wet bags and what have you. But these were Mexican guest workers that were desperately needed in the United States to keep the railroads working, to harvest the crops. Otherwise, they would have rotted on the fields. And tens of thousands of braceros went through that. There are only 2 standing bracero reception centers, and one of them is in Socorro, the Rio Vista reception center, and the other one is here. So it would be a great shame to demolish this hugely important and significant site for the history of one of the largest international labor agreements in the United States that happened. More than 4 million braceros passed through these kinds of processing centers between 1942 and 1964.
So that's kind of an overview, but I mean, the actual creation of the site here, I mean, the actual start of it, what was called for in this, again, 1940s article about El Pasans will gather tonight to dedicate new, at that point in time, $321,000 livestock exhibition building, which I'd buy that building several times over if I could pay that for it today here. So even just that showing the changes in time that we've seen here. So that's how it started. And so how did the site actually progress in its construction? I mean, that was one of the major parts of it, but how did that actually end up the full scope of what exists on what we call the Coliseum site? How did the growth happen of all these different facilities?
So because it was up for rodeo and stuff like that, they started building an equestrian center, and I don't remember when that was dedicated and what year that was. That turned into part of being with the Coliseum, which is now the event center. So that's where we were able to hold events too, and that's where you had the county fair, livestock show, and you're able to use all that property, and you had the barns in the back that you see with the metal tents and stuff like that we still use to this day. Yes. Right. They're not in the best conditions, and we're working on that. We were actually working on changing what we call the judging arena.
Okay.
And seeing what we could do is put a new metal shed out there and improve that. And you could use that for still events for the rodeo, livestock.
Sure.
We were looking at even making it kind of a rec center too, that you could bring in pickleball. That's some indoor events and stuff like that. So we had plans, and we were looking at that, and then this came along, and so it's hopefully seeing what happens so that we can do more. But that's what I mean. All that property is used by some different organization and event because there's just so much there.
Absolutely. So we're going to be delving more into that history and talking a lot further about this, including some of the things that we've been alluding to about potentials for the future that we'll be getting towards a little bit later in the program. But tell you what, got to take that first break of this hour right now. Again, that's Tony Rodriguez, Director of Events with the El Paso Sports Commission, and also joining us here, of course, Dr. David Romo, author and historian, and we're talking a lot about partially your presentation you made on this area. So talking more about that, the history, the performances, different events that have been held there over the years, the eras of use, if you will. So stay tuned for more on the El Paso History Radio Show after this break on News Radio 690 KTSM.
You are listening to the El Paso History Radio Show streaming on Facebook, where you can find archive radio programs. The El Paso History Radio Show also streams on the Facebook page Remember in El Paso When, run by Chief Administrator Barbara Gibbon-Baney, known as BGB. Check out that page for thousands of archive pictures and videos of El Paso history. Remember in El Paso When on Facebook. The El Paso History Radio Show also streams on Saturday mornings on our YouTube channel, El Paso History TV. Go to youtube.com/El Paso History TV for archives of the El Paso History Radio Show. Also on that YouTube channel, you can see for free many other videos, documentaries, and lectures about El Paso area history at youtube.com/El Paso History TV. Additionally, watch a dozen TV documentaries about El Paso history for free there on our YouTube channel. This includes Legends of El Paso's Mountains, Gunfights of the Old West, El Paso's Waco Tanks, Mexican Revolution sites in El Paso, and 8 more TV documentaries produced by El Paso filmmaker Jackson Polk since 2001. And at youtube.com/El Paso History TV, you can watch for free 20 short videos we produced that were broadcast on ABC 7 KVIA TV newscasts. This series is called El Paso History TV and features Spanish missions and churches on El Paso's Mission Trail, plus the Guadalupe Mission in Juarez, Mexico. That church was built in 1659 and is the oldest known adobe building on the El Paso Juarez Valley. It still welcomes Catholic worshipers today. Go to El Paso History TV on youtube.com. You are listening. You are listening to the El Paso History Radio Show, streaming on Facebook, where you can find archive radio programs. The El Paso History Radio Show also streams on the Facebook page Remember in El Paso When, run by Chief Administrator Barbara Gibbon-Bainey, known as BGB. Check out that page for thousands of archived pictures and videos of El Paso history. Remember in El Paso When on Facebook. The El Paso History Radio Show also streams on Saturday mornings on our YouTube channel, El Paso History TV. Go to youtube.com/El Paso History TV for archives of the El Paso History Radio Show. Also on that YouTube channel, you can see for free many other videos, documentaries, and lectures about El Paso area history at youtube.com/El Paso History TV. Additionally, watch a dozen TV documentaries about El Paso history for free there on our YouTube channel. This includes Legends of El Paso's Mountains, Gunfights of the Old West, El Paso's Waco Tanks, Mexican Revolution sites in El Paso, and 8 more TV documentaries produced by El Paso filmmaker Jackson Polk since 2001. And at youtube.com/El Paso History TV, you can watch for free 20 short videos we produced that were broadcast on ABC 7 KVIA TV newscasts. This series is called El Paso History TV and features Spanish missions and churches on El Paso's Mission Trail, plus the Guadalupe Mission in Juarez, Mexico. That church was built in 1659 and is the oldest known adobe building on the El Paso Juarez Valley. It still welcomes Catholic worshipers today. Go to El Paso History TV on youtube.com. You are listening. Shows.
Welcome back to El Paso History Radio Show. I'm your host, Andrew J. Polk, in this pre-recorded episode. Of course, we are the El Paso History Radio Show on Facebook. Go there for our weekly promo announcements each and every week on the topics of the program that are coming up for you. Also go to our YouTube channel, youtube.com/El Paso History TV, where you can both, see these shows and the episodes that we have, including the entire archive that we've been putting online, plus the entire El Paso Gold DVD series from Capstone Productions, covering more than the last 20 years of documentary production in town, uploaded for free entirely for your viewing pleasure, plus the more recent 20 ABC7 TV series segments from El Paso History TV. Again, that's over on the YouTube. So again, joining us here in studio right now, we do have Tony Rodriguez, Director of Events with the El Paso Sports Commission, and Dr. David Romo, author and historian. So getting to the roots of the Coliseum, the use of the site, and again, why the building was originally called for, created, etc., as a livestock exhibition building, and that pretty well immediately led itself towards, well, livestock exhibitions, but also the more, let's call it, exciting version of events. I mean, rodeo in general, which has also been something that you all have had some recent announcements on as well, right?
Yeah, and you know what? I'll let Dr. Romo talk about the Sheriff's Posse, the first event there. I know you kind of did some research on that and the rodeo, and I'll talk about the new stuff.
Okay.
Fair enough.
That was the original event that happened there, the Sheriff's Posse. There were also children's rodeos at the time. Before you had the Coliseum, a lot of the rodeo shows were held at Washington Park. And actually, in the very beginning, we're talking about the 1940s, the land was owned by the city. And the Coliseum itself, the building itself of 7,000 almost 7,000 person arenas was owned by the county, and it was only later that the city transferred the land itself to the county. So before that, the rodeo shows were held in different places, and Washington Park was an important place where the rodeos were held, and that was part of the original impetus. You had some of the local leaders here saying, we want El Paso to be the center of this rodeo town. And so I also, when I'm giving talks to people about the Coliseum, remember the word rodeo is a Spanish word, rodeo. Yeah. All these words, lazo, everything, la riata, lariat, all of these come very much from the vaquero, right? Later it was buckaroo. That comes from vaquero. That was a mispronunciation of
it does.
Buckaroo,
I didn't make that connection.
Right? So,
all right.
So even that is grounded very much in this border Tejano culture, right? Okay. And that's an element that I bring out in my tours. But let Tony talk more about the more recent rodeos. And
I love this guy. I learn something new every time, man.
Yeah, absolutely.
No, it's great. No, and that's one of the things we're trying to still do is bring back that tradition. Yes, we do have the tough Hedeman bull riding that we bring every year. They come every year, and it's sold out. There's not one seat that's empty there, and it's a great event. And And just to see when you're walking around and you see these bulls, it's like, whoa, it's pretty crazy. But one thing that we announced last week is that we're bringing back the rodeo.
Right.
So this is a 2-day event in June, and it's rodeo. It's everything that a rodeo consists of. So to bring that back after 7-9 years, is a good thing. It's a great thing. It brings back that history that's what it's for. That's what the building was for, was rodeo. So we're excited. I know they're excited to bring back that, and that's what the marketing is, that the tradition returns. And so what you guys were talking about too, I mean, history is made there. And that's what we try and do. And I know some of the events that other events that we're doing, we're trying to restore that and bring that back, so people know, like, oh yeah, I remember going to that, and they're bringing their kids.
Sure.
But the rodeo is one of the first big things that we're doing, so we're excited about that. We're pretty stoked.
So then, to kind of differentiate between rodeo, because again, I was surprised when it was put it's been 9 years since we've had rodeo in town. I could have sworn we've had stuff going on. So beyond just bull riding, what are we talking about? It's going to be happening there, or has historically happened there?
The buck riding, I think that's what it's called when you're on the horse and trying to stay off that. What is that? 8 seconds. The lassos. So there's just all different kinds of events.
Roping competitions, things like that. Okay.
So you're gonna have 9-10 events going on, and like I said, for 2 days. And hopefully we can bring that back. It does successful, then maybe they'll come back for 4 days. And so it's just trying to get that stepping stone and bring that back, and then hopefully people like it and they remember it.
Absolutely. And so when it comes to the history of what was going on when these events were held, I mean, as much as it's an entertainment type thing, but when it comes to, I mean, it's also basically an examination of functional skills that were, I mean, still very much in use, and maybe not immediately in El Paso or El Paso County these days, but still, in and around this region, there's ranching, there's, farming of that type and scale. So these are still very much skills in use. I swear I saw headed out when there were those big rains that saw the pleasant flooding out towards the salt flats in recent years. I mean, it was technically flooding, but it was not in the worst way that it's happened. There was at least one guy that I saw going by that was out there on a horse tending to his cows, as opposed to, I think a lot of people think like, oh, it's all ATVs, it's all mechanized these days. And that's not the case even in our region, right?
Yeah, and what's real interesting to me is this, because I think the Coliseum has also held charreadas. Is that correct, Tony?
Right.
Yeah, correct.
So the charreadas, you see some of their competitions. As an historian, I can read sections of history books in California from the 1840s where the Californians were doing a lot of the same type of things that are going on in the charreadas, right? So it offers something for everybody. And as a historian, I'll go to these events and people might just be enjoying them as something in the moment.
Sure.
But to me, it's a reconnection with these traditions.
Well, just like we have when Pepe Aguilar comes, he brings the jarapeo. So that's a whole kind of the same thing with the rodeo, Mexican rodeo, but it's him singing. I mean, he takes that all over the country. Mexico City down there, I know he was just there recently and sold out that big, huge arena. So to have something like that come here to the Coliseum and still be able to use kind of the rodeo jarapeo, I mean, it's truly amazing. It's just something that it's unbelievable. And it's crazy because one day we're dirts all over the Coliseum, and then we're taking all that out to do ice the next day because we got Disney on ice that week.
Right.
So it was pretty crazy when we did that. I think it was jarapeo when we had Pepe Aguilar. We had to get all that dirt out within days because then we had AEW coming in for their live event. So that was
slight difference.
Oh yeah. It's night and day. So to do all these different kind of events, it's pretty crazy to see how we get it done. I mean, the staff there we have is great.
I don't know, AEW in a dirt pile might be interesting in its own right, but I could see them not wanting to do that. Again, that's Tony Rodriguez, Director of Events with the El Paso Sports Commission. Also, again, speaking there is Dr. David Romo, author and historian. Got to take that next break right now. Coming out of this break, we'll talk more about some of the other events and types of things that have been going on at the El Paso County Coliseum and its history, so stay tuned for more on the El Paso History Radio Show on News Radio 690 KTSM.
You are listening to the El Paso History Radio Show, streaming on Facebook, where you can find archive radio programs. The El Paso History Radio Show also streams on the Facebook page Remember in El Paso When, run by Chief Administrator Barbara Gibbon-Bainey, known as BGB. Check out that page for thousands of archived pictures and videos of El Paso history. Remember in El Paso When on Facebook. The El Paso History Radio Show also streams on Saturday mornings on our YouTube channel, El Paso History TV. Go to youtube.com/El Paso History TV for archives of the El Paso History Radio Show. Also on that YouTube channel, you can see for free many other videos, documentaries, and lectures about El Paso area history at youtube.com/El Paso History TV. Additionally, watch a dozen TV documentaries about El Paso history for free there on our YouTube channel. This includes Legends of El Paso's Mountains, Gunfights of the Old West, El Paso's Waco Tanks, Mexican Revolution sites in El Paso, and 8 more TV documentaries produced by El Paso filmmaker Jackson Polk since 2001. And at youtube.com/El Paso History TV, you can watch for free 20 short videos we produced that were broadcast on ABC 7 KVIA TV newscasts. This series is called El Paso History TV and features Spanish missions and churches on El Paso's Mission Trail, plus the Guadalupe Mission in Juarez, Mexico. That church was built in 1659 and is the oldest known adobe building on the El Paso Juarez Valley. It still welcomes Catholic worshipers today. Go to El Paso History TV on youtube.com. You are listening. You are listening to the El Paso History Radio Show, streaming on Facebook, where you can find archive radio programs. The El Paso History Radio Show also streams on the Facebook page Remember in El Paso When, run by Chief Administrator Barbara Gibbon-Baney, known as BGB. Check out that page for thousands of archive pictures and videos of El Paso history. Remember in El Paso When on Facebook. The El Paso History Radio Show also streams on Saturday mornings on our YouTube channel, El Paso History TV. Go to youtube.com/El Paso History TV for archives of the El Paso History Radio Show. Also on that YouTube channel, you can see for free many other videos, documentaries, and lectures about El Paso area history at youtube.com/El Paso History TV. Additionally, watch a dozen TV documentaries about El Paso history for free there on our YouTube channel. This includes Legends of El Paso's Mountains, Gunfights of the Old West, El Paso's Waco Tanks, Mexican Revolution sites in El Paso, and 8 more TV documentaries produced by El Paso filmmaker Jackson Polk since 2001. And at youtube.com/El Paso History TV, you can watch for free 20 short videos we produced that were broadcast on ABC 7 KVIA TV newscasts. This series is called El Paso History TV and features Spanish missions and churches on El Paso's Mission Trail, plus the Guadalupe Mission in Juarez, Mexico. That church was built in 1659 and is the oldest known adobe building on the El Paso Juarez Valley. It still welcomes Catholic worshipers today. Go to El Paso History TV on youtube.com. You are listening. Today.
Welcome back to the El Paso History Radio Show, airing in this pre-recorded episode on News Radio 690 KTSM. I'm your host, Andrew J. Polk. Of course, we want to mention some of our other great partners in promoting different aspects of El Paso's history, including the great group over at Celebration of Our Mountains. They are still very much focused on doing some of the interesting things going on, and particularly in the natural, physical, but also, constructed environment, all the aspects that exist in our region that affect the world we inhabit. So they're doing some both branching out and returning to their roots. They're going to be having their first meeting back at Artavino's Desert Crossing, as they will be having in the last Thursday of each month, starting this month, April. So they're going to be meeting out there again this coming week, April 27th, 7 p.m. at Artavino's Desert Crossing. If you want to find out any more information, reach out to them, or even specifically get involved with them and find out what they got going on. Best way to do that these days is via email. Email their new president, or returning president, I guess might be the way to put it. philipgoodell43@gmail.com is the email address. That's philipgoodell43@gmail.com in order to reach out to them and find out. But again, Artavino Desert Crossing this coming Thursday, 7 p.m., as they'll be doing that the last Thursday of each month, starting here in April. But again, joining us here in studio right now, we do have Tony Rodriguez, Director of Events with the El Paso Sports Commission, and again, Dr. David Romo, author and historian, and particularly with some tours that have been going on involving the arena site. So, when it comes to, we talked a lot about kind of the initial establishment, some of the functional use of the actual county coliseum and its use as, livestock arena, all these related things. But there was also, of course, and the part that I think people bring up the most has been performances. Music over the years is one of the significant things, and there's been quite the history of that. And frankly, it's one of the ways we kind of started wanting to explore this subject as, of course, I mean, we're going to talk about it, but the Coliseum has come up in the news in recent days, and those potentials we'll talk about a little bit later. But the remembrances of the performances is one of the biggest responses that, again, just happened to me and in our different aspect of airwaves. So going back to there have been famous names across the generations coming through the El Paso County Coliseum is the shortest way I can think to put it.
That's right. And one of the most famous that really started off a great list, especially of jazz musicians, R&B musicians, mambo. Duke Ellington, he comes in the late 40s. And then you have Louis Armstrong after a few weeks after having performed in front of the Queen of England. You have Perez Prado, and that whole Afro-Cuban Latin beat was extremely popular in our community. We're talking about the 40s and 50s. And one of the things that Dizzy Gillespie was here as well, Lionel Hampton, and then later you have people like James Brown, Little Richard. And some of them, after playing at the Coliseum, they would go to this Rusty's place on Alameda. And Rusty's was owned by the promoters that would bring these bands here. And there were two African-American leaders of the community. They were in the NCAAP.
NAACP.
NAACP. I always kind of get those.
Gotcha.
One of them was Dr. Vernon Collins, who was the leader of that organization, and the other one was Marvin Williams, and he was a promoter, and he owned a record shop on Alameda Street. So he was the one that was bringing in a lot of these big names, African-American musicians. And so at that time, if you go to the Coliseum, it was one of the sites where there could be mixed audiences, but there were chairs or a rope that would divide the African-American section from the white section. And there was a whole big movement. And later, there was a union, especially Mexican-American community leaders, labor leaders, African-American leaders, and some white progressive leaders here in El Paso pushed for the integration of the Coliseum. So the Coliseum was the first, for sure, county-founded place where they were able to get rid of that division. It was the first integrated official venue in El Paso before any city. And so that tells like these hidden civil rights movements that were going on in the 40s and early 50s, right?
Very interesting. I mean, even just the scope of the performances on their own, going back to some of those newspaper clippings that you have of the performances. I mean, Duke Ellington, the great Louis Armstrong, Perez Prado, all of them, I just want to point out there for those that can't see it, all of them say Duke Ellington and his famous orchestra, the great Louis Armstrong and his orchestra, Perez Prado and his original RCA Victor recording orchestra and entire company. So these weren't just, a stage and, the main performer up on it. These were whole cast of characters and productions coming in.
Oh, yeah. And, one of the things that Tony and I did when we had these tours going through the Coliseum is that we took him to the dressing rooms. Where you had people like Louis Armstrong, later Elvis, Johnny Cash, Selina, and they're refurbished now, but they're part of the original place. So it was just this great feeling, right? I don't know, Tony.
Yeah, no, I mean, you can't. The Coliseum's all cement; it's bricks. You can't change anything in there, really. I mean, you can add stuff like that, but the original dressing rooms, that's where they stayed. And so to give that tour and just do that walk through where an artist comes in and then they go to their dressing room, I mean, it gives you that chills. I remember when I first got there and just the Elvis movie came out, and I'm a huge Elvis fan.
Okay.
So walking where he went through the backstage, walking up to the dressing room and I took a seat there and just trying to soak it all in and just say, man, Elvis stayed in this dressing room. It gives you the chills. I'm getting chills right now just thinking about it, but it's pretty cool just knowing that. When you have these type of artists back in the day that you're just like, wow,
they were right here.
They were right here. It's crazy.
Yeah, and you go to places like Nashville where all these great musicians have been, and they've turned it into kind of a living museum. It's still a vibrant cultural venue, and there's still stuff going on. And that was one of the conversations that I had with the county. I was hired as a consultant with the county to promote these forgotten histories.
Right.
And I said, the Coliseum is one of our richest sites. I mean, this is an institution that should be preserved and restored and refurbished, not like right now. And I know we'll talk about it later in the show that there's plans.
We'll definitely talk about that coming up. Don't worry.
Tear it down. And I think it's important for people to, and everybody from like the high school kids, local high school kids. And we had a show, a performance that was part of this tour, and it was a musical history of the Coliseum. So what we did is we had my band, Los Liminals, do a kind of a talk. We would talk through the different, like explain what swing means, for instance, or jazz as a kind of a lifestyle, and how it was important, that connection that I told you with the local civil rights movement and that history that isn't very well known. And then later take it all the way, you know, to all the different genres of music that have been played there.
The many different types of performances happened there. Again, we have some of the clippings of when Elvis was there that is part of your presentation. Because
Elvis was there in 1956.
Yep, came through during the, I mean, it's kind of thinking, and it's funny to look at it from the modern perspective as how shocking that was then. I mean, some of the names, Elvis the Pelvis, because of the way he was moving, that would be fairly tame by modern, it would be almost yawn-worthy by modern standards if you're trying to shock someone. Let's just put it that way. Not that he was a bad performer, don't get me wrong, but on the whole, well, let's just say there's plenty of things I'm shocked by these days, and that this doesn't even hold a candle to in that way. But he's coming through and do these performances in town. So one of the kind of concepts that has been put to me in this way is that part of the reason that we saw these type of performances coming through town, I mean, El Paso was not the size it is even today, but that El Paso was essentially for a lot of the big acts transiting from, say, like, you know, the East Coast or even, you know, eastern part of Texas and then headed to the West Coast, that El Paso was essentially a way station and a good stopover point because, I mean, you know, tour buses still come through, but occasionally, though, there's an artist that will end up flying through, but just as a functional, hey, we got to stop somewhere between, say, San Antonio and Phoenix. This is a good place to go here. Is that kind of a feature that you see when you look at some of these older performances?
Yeah, and remember that the El Paso County Coliseum was the biggest performance space between Los Angeles and Dallas at that time. So everybody would pass through here because of the Coliseum.
And it's still to that date. I mean, take, for example, we have Grupo Firme coming up. And I forget where they're performing before. I think it's East. And so they had a week off before they head west. Well, El Paso was perfect for them.
Right.
So they're coming here for 2 nights. So you still have those concerts, whether they're coming from Phoenix and need to go to Dallas.
Sure.
El Paso's a stop. And so you still have that today. I know one of the pictures you have coming up of the past ones we had with Jackson 5.
Oh, absolutely.
And one thing that I tell people now is like, Jackson 5, I think, is either going to be 49 or 50 years since they played at the Coliseum back in October this year.
Yeah.
But just turns out that in August, Michael Jackson's daughter, Paris Jackson, is coming to open for Incubus. So you have that history. I mean, it's just all over. I know when Jack White was here performing, he was up there just chilling out in one of the dressing rooms. There was an additional dressing room, so the president and I went up to go check out, see what was going on. Resolved the issue, chatted for a little bit, and turned out he's a big Johnny Cash fan. And we were like, dude, you're sitting in a dressing room where Johnny Cash and his band stayed here.
Right.
And he just was in awe to know that. And that's what we're trying to do. AEW, when they came in, Vicky Guerrero was here. And the wrestlers all love Eddie Guerrero. And that's where Eddie Guerrero would perform at the El Paso County Coliseum. And so they have those memories and they share that. And the stars are just amazed about where they're performing that people before them performed. So it's just crazy.
Absolutely. So again, that's Tony Rodriguez, Director of Events, the El Paso Sports Commission. Again, also Dr. David Romo, author and historian. Got to take that next break right now. But coming out of this break, talking more about some of the performance events and other types of things that have happened at the El Paso County Coliseum over the years. So stay tuned for more on the El Paso History Radio Show after this brief break on News Radio 690 KTSM.
You are listening to the El Paso History Radio Show, streaming on Facebook, where you can find archive radio programs. The El Paso History Radio Show also streams on the Facebook page Remember in El Paso When, run by Chief Administrator Barbara Gibbon-Baney, known as BGB. Check out that page for thousands of archived pictures and videos of El Paso history. Remember in El Paso When on Facebook. The El Paso History Radio Show also streams on Saturday mornings on our YouTube channel, El Paso History TV. Go to youtube.com/El Paso History TV for archives of the El Paso History Radio Show. Also on that YouTube channel, you can see for free many other videos, documentaries, and lectures about El Paso area history at youtube.com/El Paso History TV. Additionally, watch a dozen TV documentaries about El Paso history for free there on our YouTube channel. This includes Legends of El Paso's Mountains, Gunfights of the Old West, El Paso's Waco Tanks, Mexican Revolution sites in El Paso, and 8 more TV documentaries produced by El Paso filmmaker Jackson Polk since 2001. And at youtube.com/El Paso History TV, you can watch for free 20 short videos we produced that were broadcast on ABC 7 KVIA TV newscasts. This series is called El Paso History TV and features Spanish missions and churches on El Paso's Mission Trail, plus the Guadalupe Mission in Juarez, Mexico. That church was built in 1659 and is the oldest known adobe building on the El Paso Juarez Valley. It still welcomes Catholic worshipers today. Go to El Paso History TV on youtube.com. You are listening. You are listening to the El Paso History Radio Show, streaming on Facebook, where you can find archive radio programs. The El Paso History Radio Show also streams on the Facebook page Remember in El Paso When, run by Chief Administrator Barbara Gibbon-Bainey, known as BGB. Check out that page for thousands of archived pictures and videos of El Paso history. Remember in El Paso When on Facebook. The El Paso History Radio Show also streams on Saturday mornings on our YouTube channel, El Paso History TV. Go to youtube.com/El Paso History TV for archives of the El Paso History Radio Show. Also on that YouTube channel, you can see for free many other videos, documentaries, and lectures about El Paso area history at youtube.com/El Paso History TV. Additionally, watch a dozen TV documentaries about El Paso history for free there on our YouTube channel. This includes Legends of El Paso's Mountains, Gunfights of the Old West, El Paso's Waco Tanks, Mexican Revolution sites in El Paso, and 8 more TV documentaries produced by El Paso filmmaker Jackson Polk since 2001. And at youtube.com/El Paso History TV, you can watch for free 20 short videos we produced that were broadcast on ABC 7 KVIA TV newscasts. This series is called El Paso History TV and features Spanish missions and churches on El Paso's Mission Trail, plus the Guadalupe Mission in Juarez, Mexico. That church was built in 1659 and is the oldest known adobe building on the El Paso Juarez Valley. It still welcomes Catholic worshipers today. Go to El Paso History TV on youtube.com. You are listening.
Thank you all so very much for joining us here for the El Paso History Radio Show, airing in this pre-recorded episode on News Radio 690 KTSM. I am your host, Andrew J. Polk, of course, talking about some other great promoters of different aspects of El Paso's, even musical history. Of course, Rick Kern's music podcast, Talk and Rock Radio, often talking about some of the other history of different venues, performances that came through town, particularly in the golden era of rock and roll, as is his personal experience, among other things, but also the continuing ways that performers and acts like these come through town. So talkandrockradio.com is where to find that. talkandrockradio.com. I've had them on the show previously to talk about some of those remembrances, so check them out there and certainly support maybe all the different aspects of promoting El Paso's history. But talking specifically about major performances having come through town, again, Tony Rodriguez, Director of Events with the El Paso Sports Commission, and again, Dr. David Romo, author and historian, talking with us about the El Paso County Coliseum, which again, both, at its time and still very much arguably one of the premier event centers in town. One of now, but at the time, certainly, you'd be hard-pressed to find something else of the size and scope that was available there, and that's one of the reasons that beyond the performances, beyond the music that came through, there was also a lot of sporting events. Rodeo, sure, at the start, but there's a lot more. You got a space and you got to want to hold stuff into it. You got these major draws like, names that are still recognizable to this day. Joe Louis having an exhibition fight here in town.
Yes, Joe Louis had an exhibition fight in, I don't remember the exact year, but early 1950s. And by then, it was an exhibition fight. I don't think he was at the peak of his strength. And I think he made an invitation to the 2 best boxers from the area, and he beat them both. But what's important about that is going back to this idea of segregation. Okay. So if you went to Juarez, the boxing matches were not segregated. African Americans could be part of the crowd. There was no separate section. The Coliseum was. And so the promoter, he deliberately did not enforce segregation at this time. And it was a big scandal because the county commissions were divided on whether it should be enforced or not. And so that's another side. Sports are also about politics, right?
Sure.
Sports are so many things. So before it was used as a boxing venue, and Golden Gloves is very important. So the amateur boxing from local boxers, especially among the high school students.
Oh, absolutely.
We had their own Golden Gloves. Jefferson had their own Golden Gloves teams. Wrestling was the first kind of major sport that was like, that's, if you look at the late 40s, early 50s, that's all you're going to see. So all kinds of funky wrestling situations. So you had women's wrestling, which is pretty advanced for that time, right? Women were not supposed to be involved in sports.
Yeah.
So-called violent
Let's put
sports.
it that way.
You had sumo wrestling. So you had some of the top sumo Japanese wrestlers.
Huh, okay.
You had, things like midget wrestling. There was entertainment stuff. There was this guy that was a hypnotist that would hypnotize his opponent. It was part of the entertainment.
So when you were talking about wrestling in a few different ways here, both of the what's the right way to put it? The sport of wrestling, the Olympic version of wrestling, that kind of thing. And then once you're talking about the hypnotist, what we would consider the modern televised wrestling.
Exactly. So Gorgeous George was a big, a big event. So he's the one that inspired Muhammad Ali. He was the one that said, "I'm beautiful," and he would spray perfume on himself during the act. So that was part of the performance. Roller derby among women was also important, right? And we're talking about the 50s, way before today. I mean, there's women boxers and the ultimate championship fighting.
Sure.
But at that time, it was pretty, advanced for women to have these kind of sports, other than like the escapades and what have you.
Sure. And I mean, that's apparently my grandfather was a big follower of roller derby because it would even be televised around here back at that point in time, coming from there. But I just want to point out one thing from that Joe Louis actual poster, the flyer that was from it. Yeah, it just says, personal appearance, Joe Louis, world heavyweight champion versus two worthy foes. Those being the ones pulled from the community, it sounds like. So,
right.
two punching bags, another way to put it here. And another interesting clip that you have of an event that happened here is talking about an exhibition of Wilt Chamberlain. But I want to read the full thing before I get into it. Watch the great Wilt Chamberlain in professional volleyball action. Yeah. That is not the sport I associate him with, I have to admit to you.
Tony, you want to talk about that one?
Yeah, I mean, that's the time he came to El Paso. I mean, as tall as he was too, right? So you can have that volleyball, but that's what talks about different events. Like, you would never think about that.
No, and particularly with Wilt Chamberlain, it's a ball and he's tall, but not the ball I expected him to have.
No.
Basketball. And so that was an interesting, it's the El Paso Water Soul versus Southern California Bangers. In fact, there was a volleyball tournament, again, featuring Wilt Chamberlain is just fascinating to me.
Oh, yeah. And it's other events like that you have that just came here back in the day. I mean, from Dr. Romo was talking about lucha. Lucha's been prominent there at the Coliseum, and lucha libre, Mexican wrestling.
Absolutely.
So
right,
it's not just for concerts and musical acts, but it's the big old sporting events that you can do that. Besides, like we were talking about rodeo, but stuff like that.
And a lot of people would come from Juarez and other parts of Chihuahua to see not only the lucha, but even some later during the 80s. There's this book that was just written by the Chihuahua author Arredondo that talks about how so many people from Mexico, and some of them would even cross for the day, without papers, and then they're just watching an exhibit at the Coliseum and then go back, right? That was that important. So the UTEP miners right after 1967, before there were the miners, Texas Western.
Oh, sure.
They used the Coliseum for basketball matches because that the year after, I think they had problems in their auditorium, in their stadium, and so you have so many sporting events that also affected the community, and in so many different ways, right? So the event itself is one thing, but kind of the underlying, what's going on behind the scenes is also part of that history.
Absolutely.
And we're still bringing back sporting events to this day. Sure. I mean, we just had one of the biggest NAGA grappling competitions, the North American Grappling Association. Big old tournament from, kids like five years old to the adults grappling wrestling, like high school Olympic style wrestling. We have another event coming like that too. We do kind of, and I forget what it's called. I think it's called fast track racing, but it's basically throwing syrup all over the Coliseum floor, and you have these like dirt bikes just going around on that. So you're bringing different. It's crazy to see. It's a pain in the butt to clean up afterwards. Not saying that much with the syrup and all that, but it's still bringing in those kind of events to those sporting events that you had. I mean, like we were just talking about earlier too, AEW. That was live televised wrestling on TBS, TNT. To bring an event like that, I mean, and I wish I had pictures to show you, but just to see that opening shot of we're here in El Paso, Texas, and you see the fireworks go off, you don't even think you're in the Coliseum. It's just, it was awesome.
I mean, the scope of it, I think, can be overlooked sometimes as much as, I mean, it's a large building. I don't think anyone would be mistaken in thinking that it was anything but I mean, the fact that, like, monster truck shows have been held in and around there, I mean, it's a sizable facility.
Oh, so. Monster truck shows in there is crazy. I mean, yes, it is small for monster truck shows, but it is pretty cool. I mean, because any seat in the Coliseum is really not a bad seat. Yeah. You go to other venues.
You're right there.
And if you get on the way top, yes, you are on the way top. But any seat in the Coliseum, because the venue has that personal, just intimacy there, that not any seat's not a bad seat. I promise.
Again, that's Tony Rodriguez, Director of Events, with that very particular opinion with the El Paso Sports Commission. But also, again, talking with us here is Dr. David Romo, author and historian. We got to take that end of the hour break now. But so coming back after the top of the hour news, continuing on with our discussion about the history of the El Paso County Coliseum, getting into beyond the undertones of it, some of the direct political events, among other things. So stay tuned for more after this break and the top of the hour news on News Radio 690 KTSM.
You are listening to the El Paso History Radio Show, streaming on Facebook, where you can find archive radio programs. The El Paso History Radio Show also streams on the Facebook page Remember in El Paso When, run by Chief Administrator Barbara Gibbon-Bainey, known as BGB. Check out that page for thousands of archived pictures and videos of El Paso history. Remember in El Paso When on Facebook. The El Paso History Radio Show also streams on Saturday mornings on our YouTube channel, El Paso History TV. Go to youtube.com/El Paso History TV for archives of the El Paso History Radio Show. Also on that YouTube channel, you can see for free many other videos, documentaries, and lectures about El Paso area history at youtube.com/El Paso History TV. Additionally, watch a dozen TV documentaries about El Paso history for free there on our YouTube channel. This includes Legends of El Paso's Mountains, Gunfights of the Old West, El Paso's Waco Tanks, Mexican Revolution sites in El Paso, and 8 more TV documentaries produced by El Paso filmmaker Jackson Polk since 2001. And at youtube.com/El Paso History TV, you can watch for free 20 short videos we produced that were broadcast on ABC7 KVIA TV newscasts. This series is called El Paso History TV and features Spanish missions and churches on El Paso's Mission Trail, plus the Guadalupe Mission in Juarez, Mexico. That church was built in 1659 and is the oldest known adobe building on the El Paso Juarez Valley. It still welcomes Catholic worshipers today. Go to El Paso History TV on youtube.com. You are listening. You are listening to the El Paso History Radio Show, streaming on Facebook, where you can find archive radio programs. The El Paso History Radio Show also streams on the Facebook page Remember in El Paso When, run by Chief Administrator Barbara Gibbon-Bainey, known as BGB. Check out that page for thousands of archived pictures and videos of El Paso history. Remember in El Paso When on Facebook. The El Paso History Radio Show also streams on Saturday mornings on our YouTube channel, El Paso History TV. Go to youtube.com/El Paso History TV for archives of the El Paso History Radio Show. Also on that YouTube channel, you can see for free many other videos, documentaries, and lectures about El Paso area history at youtube.com/El Paso History TV. Additionally, watch a dozen TV documentaries about El Paso history for free there on our YouTube channel. This includes Legends of El Paso's Mountains, Gunfights of the Old West, El Paso's Waco Tanks, Mexican Revolution sites in El Paso, and 8 more TV documentaries produced by El Paso filmmaker Jackson Polk since 2001. And at youtube.com/El Paso History TV, you can watch for free 20 short videos we produced that were broadcast on ABC7 KVIA TV newscasts. This series is called El Paso History TV and features Spanish missions and churches on El Paso's Mission Trail, plus the Guadalupe Mission in Juarez, Mexico. That church was built in 1659 and is the oldest known adobe building on the El Paso Juarez Valley. It still welcomes Catholic worshipers today. Go to El Paso History TV on YouTube.com. You are listening. You are listening to the El Paso History Radio Show, streaming on Facebook, where you can find archive radio programs. The El Paso History Radio Show also streams on the Facebook page Remember in El Paso When, run by Chief Administrator Barbara Gibbon-Baney, known as BGB. Check out that page for thousands of archived pictures and videos of El Paso history. Remember in El Paso When on Facebook. The El Paso History Radio Show also streams on Saturday mornings on our YouTube channel, El Paso History TV. Go to youtube.com/El Paso History TV for archives of the El Paso History Radio Show. Also on that YouTube channel, you can see for free many other videos, documentaries, and lectures about El Paso area history at youtube.com/El Paso History TV. Additionally, watch a dozen TV documentaries about El Paso history for free there on our YouTube channel. This includes Legends of El Paso's Mountains, Gunfights of the Old West, El Paso's Waco Tanks, Mexican Revolution sites in El Paso, and 8 more TV documentaries produced by El Paso filmmaker Jackson Polk since 2001. And at youtube.com/El Paso History TV, you can watch for free 20 short videos we produced that were broadcast on ABC 7 KVIA TV newscasts. This series is called El Paso History TV and features Spanish missions and churches on El Paso's Mission Trail, plus the Guadalupe Mission in Juarez, Mexico. That church was built in 1659 and is the oldest known adobe building on the El Paso Juarez Valley. It still welcomes Catholic worshipers today. Go to El Paso History TV on youtube.com. You are listening. You are listening to the El Paso History Radio Show, streaming on Facebook, where you can find archive radio programs. The El Paso History Radio Show also streams on the Facebook page Remember in El Paso When, run by Chief Administrator Barbara Gibbon-Baney, known as BGB. Check out that page for thousands of archived pictures and videos of El Paso history. Remember in El Paso When on Facebook. The El Paso History Radio Show also streams on Saturday mornings on our YouTube channel, El Paso History TV. Go to youtube.com/El Paso History TV for archives of the El Paso History Radio Show. Also on that YouTube channel, you can see for free many other videos, documentaries, and lectures about El Paso area history at youtube.com/El Paso History TV. Additionally, watch a dozen TV documentaries about El Paso history for free there on our YouTube channel. This includes Legends of El Paso's Mountains, Gunfights of the Old West, El Paso's Waco Tanks, Mexican Revolution sites in El Paso, and 8 more TV documentaries produced by El Paso filmmaker Jackson Polk since 2001. And at youtube.com/El Paso History TV, you can watch for free 20 short videos we produced that were broadcast on ABC 7 KVIA TV newscasts. This series is called El Paso History TV and features Spanish missions and churches on El Paso's Mission Trail, plus the Guadalupe Mission in Juarez, Mexico. That church was built in 1659 and is the oldest known adobe building on the El Paso Juarez Valley. It still welcomes Catholic worshipers today. Go to El Paso History TV on youtube.com. You are listening.
Thank you all so very much for joining us here for the El Paso History Radio Show, airing on News Radio 690 KTSM in this pre-recorded episode, continuing our discussion of the El Paso County Coliseum, the many bits of history, the different types of events that have come through there, including some of the political ones, but other types of performances that we'll be talking about coming up, including what the potential future impacts on the area are. But starting off hour 2 of the program, as we usually do, with a history moment from documentary filmmaker Jackson Polk, talking this week about some of the history of the Chinese community in El Paso.
Chinese immigrants first arrived in El Paso shortly before the Southern Pacific Railroad completed its line here in 1881. Many of them were laborers laying track for the rail line. Once that work was complete, early Chinese immigrants opened rooming houses and grocery stores. Soon afterwards, in 1882, the U.S. government passed the Chinese Exclusion Act, which restricted Chinese immigration. However, enough Chinese remained to create a vibrant community in downtown El Paso. Into the early 1920s, El Paso's Chinese community was the largest in Texas. The Chinese contributed to the area's economy largely by growing and selling fruits and vegetables for the local market. and by opening businesses, including laundries and restaurants. The mostly male immigrants sent earnings to families in China with the intention of returning home. While retaining their native culture through language, food, community associations, and traditions, the newcomers also adopted area languages and customs. The immigrants experienced discrimination but faced fewer problems here than did the Chinese in other parts of the United States. In El Paso, Chinese continued to consume traditional goods, including food, and several of the stores in El Paso's Chinatown catered to their needs. Historic Concordia Cemetery in central El Paso is the only known Chinese cemetery in Texas. Chinese continued to migrate to El Paso into the 20th century. During the Mexican Revolution, General John J. Pershing brought hundreds of Chinese into the United States for their protection from racial violence. They were legally allowed to immigrate following General Pershing's petition to Congress. Chinese immigrants came to El Paso during the Great Depression of the 1930s. Another wave began in the late 1940s, prompted by the communist takeover of China. Today, Chinese El Pasoans continue to maintain a sense of community in the city they helped develop. I'm Jackson Polk with this history moment for the El Paso History Radio Show.
Also, at this point, I'd like to mention of another great partner in El Paso history work, Barbara Given-Bainey, operator of the great Facebook group Remember in El Paso When. You can go there and check them out for archive pictures galore, a lot of different aspects of our history on display there, and a lot of research that goes into it. They have more than 33, approaching 34,000 members as of last check, but please remember the administrators have worked hard in researching our history and the photos that have it attached to it. So when people use their photos, they do ask that credit be given to their site, and a lot of credit again to be given to Chief Admin, Owner, and Historian Barbara Given-Bainey, affectionately known as BGB, also along with admins Rick Duncan, Rick Nahara, Margaret D. Smith, and Jim Gerber, along with moderators Ben Vincent and Dan Graves. It's no mean feat to keep such a large group on task and on track, so they're always looking for a few more good hands and eyeballs on those situations. So if you want to find them, just be a participant of the group or see what's going on with it, or join their moderation or administration staff. Again, Remember in El Paso When, the Facebook group Remember in El Paso When, where you can also see our shows streaming each and every Saturday morning as we go live with the recording. So, again, joining us here in studio to continue talking about the things we're discussing today, Tony Rodriguez, Director of Events with the El Paso Sports Commission, and again, Dr. David Romo, author and historian, talking about the El Paso County Coliseum and the many types of performances, events, exhibitions, what have you. It's probably happened in some form or format around that area. So we talked a lot about some of the kind of, let's call it mid to middle of last half century, which is a confusing way to say about the 70s, but there's been a lot more going on there. But also there's been, as an event space and as a large indoor one, which is often necessary for certain scope of things, there's been, draws of even beyond performances of, or exhibitions or entertainment events to being, a rally space, which has continued on into the modern day even, right?
That's right. So there's been several highly significant political events that took place at the Coliseum, and one of them happened in 1956. 1956 was a heck of a year for the Coliseum, and that's when Elvis Presley comes, and all the young female audience is fainting, at the Coliseum. That's when Billy Graham, one of the most famous preachers at the time, a friend of many presidents, he packed both the seats and the floor of the audience.
It's quite the juxtaposition.
And then you had Louis Armstrong. But that same year, you had John F. Kennedy and Lyndon B. Johnson at a Democratic fundraiser at the Coliseum. Once again, the Coliseum was a very important stop here, and later Kennedy said that fundraiser was where he actually started his presidential campaign. So that happens 4 years before he becomes president of the United States. At that time, he was still a young senator from Massachusetts. He was a little stiff, according to the newspapers. He was there meeting some of the movers and shakers in El Paso, like Woodrow Bean. There's a highway named after him today. He was a judge. Judge Woodrow Bean, and you had Sam Young, one of the most important bankers. So he was meeting all these very important people. But he was a little stiff, whereas Lyndon B. Johnson, he was just backslapping everybody and, kissing babies, at Texas drawl, making jokes, cracking jokes. So later, Kennedy comes like a few weeks before his assassination here to El Paso and stays at the Cortez building. So that in itself is hugely important. And then there's other kinds of politics, more kind of grassroots politics. So in 1972, some of the, at least 3 of the 4 most recognized leaders of the Chicano civil rights movement were at the Coliseum, and they held a convention for a new political party, La Raza Unida Party. So they were saying neither the Democrats nor the Republicans are really meeting the needs of the Mexican American community for education, for housing, the fight against discrimination. So we're going to create our own party. So who were these leaders? You had Corky Gonzalez from Denver, who he marched with Dr. Martin Luther King, later with Reverend Abernathy during the Poor People's March. He was one of the leaders of this movement. The other one was Lopez Reyes Tijerinas, who was very important in the land grant reclamation movement in New Mexico. And then you had Jose Angel Gutierrez, a political science professor that worked very much with youth, especially in South Texas, Crystal City, other parts. And they were the ones that were leading this movement. And you had Mexican Americans from 18 states, all the way from Chicago, California, all over the United States, being there. And one of the most important events, political events for the Chicano civil rights movement, right? So once again, just an event like this qualifies the Coliseum as a National Historic Landmark. And I think it should be declared one because, very, very important kind of political event happened here. And just most recently, maybe Tony was there during another rally of a different kind of, a different part of the political spectrum.
I know we were talking about that just a little while ago, but yeah, one of the biggest events rally events is when President Trump came to the Paso County Coliseum.
Absolutely.
Held his rally there, and across the street was Congressman Beto O'Rourke at that time holding the opposite rally on that side. So, you still have events like that do happen there at the Coliseum. I'm sure everybody remembers that, whether for or against, it happened on that property.
If you were trying to drive around town that day, you definitely remember as being not going anywhere.
I will say the one thing, we did get paid, though. He did pay us for the rent of the Coliseum.
Fair enough.
So we'll take that.
There's other things that have been brought up when it comes to that, the Coliseum part that's important. And among other things, so maybe not immediately on the property, but adjacent to it. The rally that was then being held by O'Rourke was effectively the launching of his presidential campaign. He didn't announce it that day, and even though I remember at that point in time, there were all these events, and people kept being like this no, just like, we know you're going to do it. Just say it. But I noticed, because, of course, the coverage that was going on that day, that Annie Leibovitz was on the stage with him, the famous photographer who, many of the different portraits in Vanity Fair and things like that. I saw that person on stage with O'Rourke, and I was like, oh, okay, that's not just hey, I was just in the neighborhood, want me to take your picture kind of thing. And that then ended up being some of what went into the Vanity Fair. What was the cover? I was born to do it. I was born to be in it. And so that was one of the inception moments of it, or the lead up to it. So not exactly the declaration of the presidency, the presidential campaign that he then ran, but certainly one of the big lead up moments to it.
Oh, yeah. No, definitely. And even talking about that, when you're talking about rallies and stuff like that, stuff that we do once a month, too, is naturalization ceremonies.
No,
we have hundreds of people get sworn in to become U.S. citizens. They're going to remember where they got sworn in.
Absolutely.
And that's at the El Paso, because that's a big moment for them. And it's always great to see. It's always touchy. Towards the end, they'll play America the Beautiful, and they're waving their flags, and it's just an amazing sight to see. We just did an appointment ceremony for a National Guard.
Oh, really?
So to have them military there, the Army there, and then their families, it's stuff like that people don't see.
Right.
But when you work there, you get to see that. You get to see those moments, and it's pretty special. So it's not just, like I always say, it's not just concerts and events. There's other things that people don't see, but they always have that special memory, whether you went to a concert or, that's where I became a citizen.
The stuff that you can't buy tickets for, let's just put it that way, because it's not that type of event.
As historians, we have this thing called a primary document. It's one thing to read about history from a textbook, and it's another one to hold in your hand something that was signed by John F. Kennedy, right?
Sure.
And hold it in your hand, have a book that's been autographed or something like that, and that's what the Coliseum is. It's a kind of primary document, because it's one thing to hear, Kennedy went there, all these people, Elvis. And another one is to kind of go into the space, and it's almost like the effect on the molecules of the space is still there.
The
right?
sense of place.
Yeah. And that's what people don't understand. People say, oh, that's fine. You tear it down. It needs work anyway. But they don't understand that you're getting rid of something that's extremely important as a primary document. It's just a treasure, really. It's like finding the first copy of a Bible or something, that was written in the original Hebrew. That's what that is for somebody like me.
Yeah, and when you go back to, like, we were talking about President Trump and Congressman O'Rourke, that's history.
Yeah.
That, whether you like either one of them or not, that is history. That is
it's
something
momentous.
You could teach that in school. You could tell kids, listen, we had a person that was wanting to run for president, and we had a president literally across the street from each other. That is history that you don't get anywhere else. You can teach that, and it happened here in your own hometown. So it's pretty special.
Absolutely. I mean, then having the preservation of that, again, we'll be talking more about that in a minute here, but we got to take that next break right now. So coming out of this break, we're going to continue our discussion about the County Coliseum, the events that have gone in it, and the way it's still used to this day. So stay tuned for more on the El Paso History Radio Show after this brief break on News Radio 690 KTSM.
You are listening to the El Paso History Radio Show, streaming on Facebook, where you can find archive radio programs. The El Paso History Radio Show also streams on the Facebook page Remember in El Paso When, run by Chief Administrator Barbara Gibbon-Bainey, known as BGB. Check out that page for thousands of archived pictures and videos of El Paso history. Remember in El Paso When on Facebook. The El Paso History Radio Show also streams on Saturday mornings on our YouTube channel, El Paso History TV. Go to youtube.com/El Paso History TV for archives of the El Paso History Radio Show. Also on that YouTube channel, you can see for free many other videos, documentaries, and lectures about El Paso area history at youtube.com/El Paso History TV. Additionally, watch a dozen TV documentaries about El Paso history for free there on our YouTube channel. This includes Legends of El Paso's Mountains, Gunfights of the Old West, El Paso's Waco Tanks, Mexican Revolution sites in El Paso, and 8 more TV documentaries produced by El Paso filmmaker Jackson Polk since 2001. And at youtube.com/El Paso History TV, you can watch for free 20 short videos we produced that were broadcast on ABC 7 KVIA TV newscasts. This series is called El Paso History TV and features Spanish missions and churches on El Paso's Mission Trail, plus the Guadalupe Mission in Juarez, Mexico. That church was built in 1659 and is the oldest known adobe building on the El Paso Juarez Valley. It still welcomes Catholic worshipers today. Go to El Paso History TV on youtube.com. You are listening. You are listening to the El Paso History Radio Show, streaming on Facebook, where you can find archive radio programs. The El Paso History Radio Show also streams on the Facebook page Remember in El Paso When, run by Chief Administrator Barbara Gibbon-Bainey, known as BGB. Check out that page for thousands of archived pictures and videos of El Paso history. Remember in El Paso When on Facebook. The El Paso History Radio Show also streams on Saturday mornings on our YouTube channel, El Paso History TV. Go to youtube.com/El Paso History TV for archives of the El Paso History Radio Show. Also on that YouTube channel, you can see for free many other videos, documentaries, and lectures about El Paso area history at youtube.com/El Paso History TV. Additionally, watch a dozen TV documentaries about El Paso history for free there on our YouTube channel. This includes Legends of El Paso's Mountains, Gunfights of the Old West, El Paso's Waco Tanks, Mexican Revolution sites in El Paso, and 8 more TV documentaries produced by El Paso filmmaker Jackson Polk since 2001. And at youtube.com/El Paso History TV, you can watch for free 20 short videos we produced that were broadcast on ABC 7 KVIA TV newscasts. This series is called El Paso History TV and features Spanish missions and churches on El Paso's Mission Trail, plus the Guadalupe Mission in Juarez, Mexico. That church was built in 1659 and is the oldest known adobe building on the El Paso Juarez Valley. It still welcomes Catholic worshipers today. Go to El Paso History TV on youtube.com. You are listening. History.
Thank you all so very much for joining us here for the El Paso History Radio Show, airing in this pre-recorded episode on News Radio 690 KTSM. I'm your host, Andrew J. Polk. Usually at this point during the program, tell you we got coming up for you next week on the show. And next week, as this month, we do mark the 10-year anniversary of the final significant demolition on the former Asarco site, that of the stacks themselves. Going to be visiting actually with Jackson Polk, who I was along with on the documentary crew, doing a lot of work in and around the site ahead of its demolition, and then we're certainly there on the actual day of the removal of both of the smokestacks. I know the one of the major ones is often focused on, but we'll be delving into that, the times that we spent going through the site after it had been shut down, but before the final demolitions ended up taking place, that ended up being encapsulated into the last tour of the Asarco smelter video. So we'll be going through some of that history, our experiences, and things that didn't even necessarily make it into the video. So that'll be next week for you on the program. And so, of course, joining us here in studio to talk about our discussion today about the El Paso County Coliseum, still joined by, again, Tony Rodriguez, Director of Events with the El Paso Sports Commission, along with Dr. David Romo, author and historian. So, I mean, there's been so many different types of events that have happened at the El Paso County Coliseum, and I'm sure there are a lot of people in the comments talking about their specific remembrances, the kind of performances they've been to. I just want to kind of quickly go through some of the ones that we may have mentioned, but maybe not have focused enough on, the ones that you have some of the documentation of, particularly Dr. Romo, about the different types of performances that have happened here. I mean, ever since the era we were already talking about, in the 50s and the 60s, like this one, the poster from the Ike and Tina Turner Review, along with the Human Bombshell, among others.
Yeah, and this is one of my favorite posters. I had the privilege, and I love it. I'm like a kid in a candy store when I can go through these archives.
Oh, yeah.
And the Coliseum still has some of the archives, some of the clippings, some of these posters, the circus posters, and this was one of my favorites. So Ike and Tina Turner, they performed at the El Paso County Coliseum on July 2nd, 1966, and that was the same year that they toured with the Rolling Stones in the UK.
Oh, wow.
And
Okay.
released their highly successful R&B album, Deep River Mountain High. So that when we had our musical historical tour, the Coliseum, where we took people to the same dressing room and what have you, that was one of the songs that we played.
Of course.
There's just so much, and the list is literally in the thousands of just incredible
So, this
musicians.
Is by no means exhaustive, but just kind of giving a speed tour, some of the significant ones. Of course, the Jackson 5, kind of progressing through history as we're talking here. Yeah. The Jackson 5 coming here in 1973. So
1973 with their
50 years,
Motown sound. So like I said, like James Brown was at the Coliseum. I don't know what. Give me off the top of your head some of these names, Tony.
I actually just trying to pull up an Instagram post that Ozzy Osbourne tweeted back on February 23rd. He or posted on Instagram. He put the ticket of the date that he was performed, Tuesday, February 23rd, 1982, 8 p.m. Ozzy Osbourne
at the El Paso County Coliseum,
and tickets were $9. So
wow,
I can tell you how
I will take 8. Yeah,
times have changed there, but yeah. But even at that time, when you get into like the 80s and kind of 90s, you saw a lot of the rock performers: Van Halen, David Lee Roth, Billy Idol. You had those performers. I think you have what is Judas Priest coming up? I think that was some.
Yeah, Judas Priest. Some of the hair bands in general, I would say, because just looking at them, the hair is prominent.
Yeah, I was going through the archives with someone from the city because they're doing a whole thing too, and John Bon Jovi was here too at one point in time. So you had the Coliseum was more of a rock concert place. That's where everything happened. Any rock band, they were at the Coliseum.
Absolutely. And then of course continuing on into I want to say this was probably into the 90s, just looking at it. Mark Anthony and his some of his tours that came up, along with some of those like Little Joe, and then who's the one down the bottom corner? I'm forgetting the name.
Juan Gabriel. He
course.
performed several times. The first time was 1972, about the same year of the La Raza Unida party. So that's that would draw people from all over, like I said, all over the state of Chihuahua, all over the border. It's been this international place for music. When Johnny Cash was here, that made headlines for other reasons. He came here a couple of times in 1966. He first got arrested because he was trying to smuggle some pills from Juarez in his socks and put it inside his guitar case. And that made, that was a big thing. Woodrow Bean actually defended him. He was his attorney.
Really?
And then he came back the next year as if nothing had happened.
Hey, it's
know?
fine. I mean, one of the things that even gets talked about, lists that go out there about the famous celebrities who have been arrested in El Paso as they go either through the airport or through the regional Border Patrol checkpoints. And upshot of that is, a lot of them were probably at the County Coliseum.
Yeah, he wrote a song about that, right? And performed it in jail and prison. At Folsom, was it?
Of course, we have to mention, we'd be very remiss if we didn't, of course, that Selina performed at the County Coliseum.
So Selina performs, and it wasn't her last performance, because I think that was at the Houston, right, at the Astrodome, but it was her last performance in El Paso. She had come several times for like the Fiesta de las Flores. But yeah, the Coliseum was that. I mean, just for that reason, the Coliseum should be saved. You know, Selina was here.
Absolutely, and that's also again featured in some of the car shows that you also have that have gone on. Of course, that remembrance definitely very prominent there, as well as we have a lowrider style looking thing with a very prominent remembrance of Selina on the front of it.
Oh yeah, I mean it's still to this day that's what people remember, Selina. But when you also talk about concerts who kind of start at the Coliseum and then become big. I mean, we had no doubt.
Oh yeah.
Ariana Grande, before she got really big, she was at the Coliseum. Green Day, always been big, but they decided to come to the Coliseum. They actually started their tour here at the Coliseum.
Oh really?
So they were here rehearsing for a couple, 3-4 days, just hanging out in El Paso.
Wow. And
their tour kicked off here. So you have kind of those bands. Luis Miguel,
right,
was doing the Coliseum. A new band, Grupo Firme. Right after COVID, that was one of the first bands we were able to get. Grupo Firme sold out. They ended up doing stadiums, AT&T, Petco, SoFi, selling out stadiums. What happens, they come back and want to do more at the Coliseum. And it's just because it's history. It's the hospitality we have. It's the venue. They know they can fill it. And so, yeah, they could have done one night at the Haskins or hell, maybe even the Sun Bowl, right? But they like that history. They're coming to the Coliseum. They're doing 2 nights. Just coming off a stadium. So you have that stuff where, you know what, yes, they do start out, get bigger arenas, but yeah, they find their way back. They love it.
Again, that's Tony Rodriguez, Director of Events with the El Paso Sports Commission, and of course also Dr. David Romo, historian and author on some of these subjects. So got to take that next break right now. Coming out of this, talk a little bit about what we've been hinting at about some of the things that could be coming up for the site of the County Coliseum. So stay tuned for more on the El Paso History Radio Show after this brief break on News Radio 690 KTSM.
You are listening to the El Paso History Radio Show, streaming on Facebook, where you can find archive radio programs. The El Paso History Radio Show also streams on the Facebook page Remember in El Paso When, run by Chief Administrator Barbara Gibbon-Baney, known as BGB. Check out that page for thousands of archived pictures and videos of El Paso history. Remember in El Paso When on Facebook. The El Paso History Radio Show also streams on Saturday mornings on our YouTube channel, El Paso History TV. Go to youtube.com/El Paso History TV for archives of the El Paso History Radio Show. Also on that YouTube channel, you can see for free many other videos, documentaries, and lectures about El Paso area history at youtube.com/El Paso History TV. Additionally, watch a dozen TV documentaries about El Paso history for free there on our YouTube channel. This includes Legends of El Paso's Mountains, Gunfights of the Old West, El Paso's Waco Tanks, Mexican Revolution sites in El Paso, and 8 more TV documentaries produced by El Paso filmmaker Jackson Polk since 2001. And at youtube.com/El Paso History TV, you can watch for free 20 short videos we produced that were broadcast on ABC 7 KVIA TV newscasts. This series is called El Paso History TV and features Spanish missions and churches on El Paso's Mission Trail, plus the Guadalupe Mission in Juarez, Mexico. That church was built in 1659 and is the oldest known adobe building on the El Paso Juarez Valley. It still welcomes Catholic worshipers today. Go to El Paso History TV on youtube.com. You are listening. You are listening to the El Paso History Radio Show, streaming on Facebook, where you can find archive radio programs. The El Paso History Radio Show also streams on the Facebook page Remember in El Paso When, run by Chief Administrator Barbara Gibbon-Baney, known as BGB. Check out that page for thousands of archived pictures and videos of El Paso history. Remember in El Paso When on Facebook. The El Paso History Radio Show also streams on Saturday mornings on our YouTube channel, El Paso History TV. Go to youtube.com/El Paso History TV for archives of the El Paso History Radio Show. Also on that YouTube channel, you can see for free many other videos, documentaries, and lectures about El Paso area history at youtube.com/El Paso History TV. Additionally, watch a dozen TV documentaries about El Paso history for free there on our YouTube channel. This includes Legends of El Paso's Mountains, Gunfights of the Old West, El Paso's Waco Tanks, Mexican Revolution sites in El Paso, and 8 more TV documentaries produced by El Paso filmmaker Jackson Polk since 2001. And at youtube.com/El Paso History TV, you can watch for free 20 short videos we produced that were broadcast on ABC 7 KVIA TV newscasts. This series is called El Paso History TV and features Spanish missions and churches on El Paso's Mission Trail, plus the Guadalupe Mission in Juarez, Mexico. That church was built in 1659 and is the oldest known adobe building on the El Paso Juarez Valley. It still welcomes Catholic worshipers today. Go to El Paso History TV on youtube.com. You are listening.
Thank you all so very much for joining us here for the El Paso History Radio Show, airing in this pre-recorded episode on News Radio 690 KTSM. I'm your host, Andrew J. Polk. Thank you for tuning in however you may be doing so, be it on air, online, live streaming through the free and reliable iHeartRadio app, or joining us over on the various social media pages, Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, and Twitch, either under the El Paso History Radio Show, El Paso History TV, or Andrew J. Polk. Of course, want to talk about some more other great partners in promoting this program and other aspects of El Paso and its history. El Paso Wink. You can go there to see our promo announcements in the B section each and every week with a little bit more description than you might find in even some of the other locations. And of course, a lot of in-depth reporting on subjects in El Paso. So El Paso's business journal, El Paso Inc., is available for home or business delivery. To get your subscription to El Paso Inc., or just see it online for yourself, go to elpasoinc.com. That's elpasoinc.com. Of course, one more event I want to mention to you all about coming up from some of those in the history community. April 29th, this Saturday, the El Paso Corral of Westerners International number 26 will hold a cowboy campfire gathering at Weaver's Cottonwood Ranch at 17924 Castillo Road in La Mesa, New Mexico from 4 to 8 p.m. You can experience frontier life through Old West storytelling, exhibits, hands-on activities, and a chuck wagon meal. Event fee is $20 per person. Old West devotees encouraged to attend, and the request is to dress Old West. RSVP by Monday, April 24th. That's this coming Monday. For more information, call 915-241-6285. That's again 915-241-6285. But again, joining us here in studio right now, we have had Tony Rodriguez, Director of Events with the El Paso Sports Commission, as well as Dr. David Romo, author and historian, and again, focus on the history of this. And we've talked a lot about the different types of performances that have happened over the years at the El Paso County Coliseum, including, the car shows. You also got, of course, rodeo, and then other sporting events, AEW, roller derby on the other side there, the circus that we've mentioned in previous years as well as, even more modern concerts. I think that we see Bad Bunny in the corner there, right?
Bad Bunny, Lil Wayne, Mon Lafette, I think that's how you pronounce her name. She opened up for Juanes. So, yeah, you have still the up-and-comers still, and now they're huge now.
Absolutely. And so I think that there's a temptation to often think of, for people who aren't focused on the history of it, is just say, it's just a place where stuff can happen, the County Coliseum, and we'll see what happens there. And, sure, if that's what you're interested in, I won't necessarily blame anyone, but one of the particular reasons, and kind of, we were talking about doing a show like this about the history, particularly since we've had the history tours that were going on recently, before there were some current events going on that could affect the history of the site going forward. But, now that this is becoming a little bit clearer, there's actually been a lot of discussion in this previous week leading up to our recording today about the potential, as we've kind of been hinting at, there are plans that involve the demolition of the County Coliseum or major impacts on the entire site, footprint surrounding areas of the County Coliseum. So going back to that aerial view for 1 second back from, the black and white in the time frame when it was still being constructed, now we're going to bring up, so this is a view that is looking, I'm going to call it from north to south, maybe kind of a little bit more skewed, looking towards, southwest, basically. But essentially looking towards the border is the viewpoint that is looking at here. So this is then a flipped view that we're going to see right now. So this one is looking north-south with the border very much at the bottom of the frame there. But the area in red that we are talking about here, this has been one of the plans that's been put forth for the expansion of the Bridge of the Americas. Of course, the Free Bridge, and anyone who drives by on I-10 during any of those rush hour times, morning or evening, can see the backups that are happening on the bridge leading south towards, again, along 54, towards the Bridge of the Americas. And so the changes, expansions, money being injected into that site is a current plan before the General Services Administration. Focuses on some of the recent visits in town, including from the Secretary of Transportation, Pete Buttigieg, and also a lot of focus of just federal action. And so there are plans that involve revamping of the actual, again, port of entry site, the pedestrian and the cargo lanes. But this plan specifically, this is alternate number 3. The area in red would be the area that would therefore be taken over in order to essentially serve the purposes of the Bridge of the Americas expansion. And so, very notably, that does include the street that is kind of to the about top to middle part of the frame. That's Paisano right there. And, of course, the bridge and the actual port facilities are over kind of the left side of the frame. So the red area encompasses the entirety of the County Coliseum site. And that is one of the potentials that has come up. So when did you first hear about this, particularly, Tony?
You know what? So before I got to the Coliseum in June, I actually worked for a TV station for KFOX and CBS. I was the assignment manager there. So I would say even last year, I think we were one of the first stations to actually break the story about the expansion about Boda before it came out, because a good friend of mine knows, and he gave me that information and just told me that, you know what, they're looking at taking all of that area. So we ended up breaking the story. Then it comes out that, you know what, here comes the money that's coming from it, from President Biden's infrastructure plan.
Right.
And here's how much, $600 and some million is coming.
Yeah. Hundreds of millions of dollars for overall projects. Not totally clear how much is going to be specifically for Boda itself, but major expansion is being sought. So again, the 3 levels of plans being discussed so far, and they've talked about this on some of our daily programs, is one is within essentially the footprint of the bridge and the bridge facilities itself. One is an expansion that would be, again, going back to that picture we just had up, the southern parts, essentially the barn where the rhinos play, among other things. So some of the footprint site, but would not touch the Coliseum itself. But this one, the alternate, again, number 3, as it's put, would involve, again, taking over of the entirety of the site.
Yeah, so the plans were initially released sometime in the first week of April. I can't remember the exact date, but but they had a meeting at the Chamizal, and they showed everybody the alternatives, the plans. And so, I mean, I'm not for any of them. I mean, we still use the judging arena, which does roller derby, lucha, it does for our county fair. So definitely not a fan of number 1. Number 2 then goes into the event center. The hockey community, figure skating community, the Rhinos is huge. You're impacting that a lot. And so it's not that you can just tear it down and then just build a ring, an ice rink in a matter of days.
Right.
That doesn't happen. And then 3 takes everything, takes the county coliseum. And listen, yeah, I have an interest in it. I work there. That's how I provide for my family. So yes, I do have an interest in that, but it's a place that people still come to. I still go to concerts there. Even before I started working there, I still go to concerts there. But my biggest thing is even just bigger than that, is the community that's impacted by that live in there. Yes, and I did hear the Congresswoman's statement yesterday, you know what, none of their property's been taken. That's not, we know that, but they're impacted by the semi-trucks, the traffic set there. I'm sure you talked about it too when they did stories about how the air pollution in that area. So it doesn't alleviate that. It makes it worse. And so this is also about the South Central community, the people who have to live around that.
Right.
But yes, when we do talk about the plans, yeah, I mean, none of them are favored. I don't like any one of them. I wish they'd do something else. I'm very proud that the Commissioner Stout has taken the lead, and as well as the other county commissioners and county judges voted to oppose all the alternatives. So definitely grateful for that. And the community has stepped up, not only the people around there, but the figure skating, the hockey community. I mean, that's home. I mean, they want people to be active. Where are you going to find an ice skating rink in El Paso? 0. So I think they need to look elsewhere. I mean, that's, and I'm sure you following news too. I mean, that's why the Tornillo Port of Entry was built. Semi-traffic goes up there. Make a modernization. Make it for cars and pedestrians. Modernize it. Yeah, definitely. But you could do it a way that doesn't take away property. Come on.
Yeah, some of the conversation that has been put forth and was part of some of the news conferences that have come out again around the time when we are recording this, from both the Congresswoman and, of course, from the county commissioners. But just from the preservation then and the historical aspects, Dr. Romo, when it comes to that, I mean, there are plenty of sites that we have in town that have like a plaque pointing out that something was on this site, whether it's on the building or not anymore. But I think it would be fair to say you're opposed to that being the only thing remaining here.
Absolutely. On so many grounds, just like Tony, as an historian, to begin with, I think it is one of the most endangered sites right now and should be declared as one of the most endangered places in Texas for sure. It should be a national landmark. It should be in that register of National Historic Places. And it would just be a tragedy from a historical point of view. And also, like Tony, I was raised in South Central El Paso. So I went to Clardy, Henderson, and Jefferson. And I lived right between the refinery on one side and then the treatment, the water treatment, sewage treatment, right? So depending on which side the wind was blowing, you would smell one thing or another, right? And so it's a form, that's history too. And some people call it environmental racism, right? That these, like now we're going to have the traffic go through that, and that's going to cause harm to people. The refinery caused harm to people, and I know many cases. And it's just a continuation of that history. So history is not only about buildings, it's also about the things like this, environmental racism, let's call it what it is, because it's usually, it goes back to when these neighborhoods were redlined, and we still have the maps from the National Archives that show the redlining, that there was not going to be any home improvement loans given to these places in El Paso, in South Central El Paso. And so that's why you would have things like this, that the health of the people there was not considered. And now you're going to have trucks right next to the Paisano Green. It's one of the most sustainable, most ecologically advanced, progressive senior citizen home in that area. You're even going to affect the health of the animals in the El Paso Zoo. So yeah, from that perspective. And then from the political perspective, the fact that yes, Tornillo, that's where the trucks should be rerouted. But they're not, because some politicians are going to get 600 million or more plus for that project. So it's this idea of needing to tear down the Coliseum, 7,000 seats, so that you can justify an unnecessary arena in downtown El Paso. So there's a lot of, in Spanish we call it movidas, kind of behind the scenes scams going on. Let's just be really frank. And that's where I oppose it to, as just a member of a community, that I don't see too much transparency. And so we're told that, no, don't worry about it, we're going to solve it. And yet those of us that are paying close attention see a lot of stuff going on behind the scenes.
So there's more that will be coming up when it comes to all of this. Again, some of the plans that have been put forth currently under discussion. So we'll see what comes out of that, particularly on more of our daily programs. But at this point, we're actually going to say goodbye to our guests. But for remembering all of the different types of performances, the types of events that have happened at the El Paso County Coliseum over the years. Hopefully a lot of people have had their own remembrances come up as part of this here. And I hope you all been leaving in the comments some of the favorite things that you have seen over the years or been able to attend there at the County Coliseum. But again, having joined us in studio right now has been, again, Tony Rodriguez, Director of Events with the El Paso Sports Commission. And again, Dr. David Romo, most recently speaking there, author and historian. And you've led tours on this and other things. So thank you both very much for having joined us here in studio to talk about these things, what has gone on with the site, and again, the potential future and what is coming up, or at least the discussions going on with all of this right now.
No, thanks for having us.
So
appreciate it.
Thank you all very much. And so we'll be back after this quick break with more and an announcement for the El Paso History Radio Show. So stay tuned for more on News Radio 690 KTSM.
You are listening to the El Paso History Radio Show, streaming on Facebook, where you can find archived radio programs. The El Paso History Radio Show also streams on the Facebook page Remember in El Paso When, run by Chief Administrator Barbara Gibbon-Bainey, known as BGB. Check out that page for thousands of archived pictures and videos of El Paso history. Remember in El Paso When on Facebook. The El Paso History Radio Show also streams on Saturday mornings on our YouTube channel, El Paso History TV. Go to youtube.com/El Paso History TV for archives of the El Paso History Radio Show. Also on that YouTube channel, you can see for free many other videos, documentaries, and lectures about El Paso area history at youtube.com/El Paso History TV. Additionally, watch a dozen TV documentaries about El Paso history for free there on our YouTube channel. This includes Legends of El Paso's Mountains, Gunfights of the Old West, El Paso's Waco Tanks, Mexican Revolution sites in El Paso, and 8 more TV documentaries produced by El Paso filmmaker Jackson Polk since 2001. And at youtube.com/El Paso History TV, you can watch for free 20 short videos we produced that were broadcast on ABC7 KVIA TV newscasts. This series is called El Paso History TV and features Spanish missions and churches on El Paso's Mission Trail, plus the Guadalupe Mission in Juarez, Mexico. That church was built in 1659 and is the oldest known adobe building on the El Paso Juarez Valley. It still welcomes Catholic worshipers today. Go to El Paso History TV on youtube.com. You are listening. You are listening to the El Paso History Radio Show, streaming on Facebook, where you can find archive radio programs. The El Paso History Radio Show also streams on the Facebook page Remember in El Paso When, run by Chief Administrator Barbara Gibbon-Bainey, known as BGB. Check out that page for thousands of archived pictures and videos of El Paso history. Remember in El Paso When on Facebook. The El Paso History Radio Show also streams on Saturday mornings on our YouTube channel, El Paso History TV. Go to youtube.com/El Paso History TV for archives of the El Paso History Radio Show. Also on that YouTube channel, you can see for free many other videos, documentaries, and lectures about El Paso area history at youtube.com/El Paso History TV. Additionally, watch a dozen TV documentaries about El Paso history for free there on our YouTube channel. This includes Legends of El Paso's Mountains, Gunfights of the Old West, El Paso's Waco Tanks, Mexican Revolution sites in El Paso, and 8 more TV documentaries produced by El Paso filmmaker Jackson Polk since 2001. And at youtube.com/El Paso History TV, you can watch for free 20 short videos we produced that were broadcast on ABC7 KVIA TV newscasts. This series is called El Paso History TV and features Spanish missions and churches on El Paso's Mission Trail, plus the Guadalupe Mission in Juarez, Mexico. That church was built in 1659 and is the oldest known adobe building on the El Paso Juarez Valley. It still welcomes Catholic worshipers today. Go to El Paso History TV on youtube.com. You are listening.
Thank you all so very much for having joined us here for the El Paso History Radio Show. I've been your host, Andrew J. Polk. Thanks again to our guests from this Saturday airing with Tony Rodriguez with the El Paso Sports Commission and historian Dr. David Romo. History and historic preservation are certainly important topics to us here on the El Paso History Radio Show, going back to the origins of the program in the 1990s when it started as the Leon Metz Show, becoming the El Paso History Radio Show in name that we know now. Upon his retirement in 2011, I got the chance to take the helm of this great show in the last year after having been a producer in the background and listening to it myself for years before that. But of course, some changes in business have changed how this show works in this last year, and now they are threatening to take this show off the air. We've had some wonderful sponsors over the years supporting this program and the focus we are able to bring to our region's unique and world-class history and those involved with it. But without more people being involved and sponsoring this show, the El Paso History Radio Show will be coming to an end. But it is not too late to change this course and for this show to be saved. If you or someone you know would like to support El Paso history and specifically have a business or organization that would like to partner with us as a sponsor of this show, please comment on our social media, online, or send me an email at andrewpolk@iheartmedia.com. I have been given some very tight deadlines, so please reach out as soon as possible. It's easy to take things for granted, but I want you all to know that I appreciate each and every one of you who have tuned in for us as we are with you on air every Saturday, 10 to noon, and have been a part of this over the decades. And I want to make sure we can continue to have this show on KTSM AM, which has been on air 94 years itself as of this weekend, and for generations more to come. Please comment on their social media or email me, andrewpolk@iheartmedia.com, if you would like to be one of our re-founding sponsors of this show. I've been your host, Andrew J. Polk, and we'll see you next weekend on the show, Saturday, 10 to noon, right here on News Radio 690 KTSM AM, and for hopefully many more to come. Thank you all very much.
You are listening to the El Paso History Radio Show, streaming on Facebook, where you can find archive radio programs. The El Paso History Radio Show also streams on the Facebook page Remember in El Paso.